In 2017, the New York Times published a story detailing the Pentagon's secret program called ATIP, which studied actual UFO sightings by United States military personnel. The program was ran by whistleblower Luis Elizondo, and the story also included leaked footage of real unidentified flying objects. The Office for the Director of National Intelligence published a report in 2021, which basically admitted that UFOs are real, we don't know what they are or where they came from, but we're pretty sure they're not from Russia or China. Also, the Pentagon now calls them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. Yeah, they did some rebranding since everyone immediately thinks of the X-Files anytime you mention UFOs, and a lot of times people tend to not take the topic seriously. At the end of 2021, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand helped pen an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, which outlined the creation of a new program at the Pentagon to study UFOs, UAPs, which included some pretty crazy language such as crash retrievals, as well as studying biological effects on people who have had close encounters with UAPs. Fast forward to May 2022, and we had actual congressional hearings about UAPs, and this is expected to be the first of many more in the coming weeks. Yes, all of this is 100% real, and I'll leave links in the description down below if you want to read more about this. Hello and welcome to Friday Night Arcade. My name is Aaron, and this week I figured, since the government has officially admitted that UFOs are real, and they're not really sure where they're from, now would be as good a time as any to shore up on any last-minute preparations you might need to make for an alien invasion. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Here's several video games to help you prepare for an alien invasion this week on Friday Night Arcade. First up is the Contra series. The majority of these run-and-gun shooters from Konami center around an alien invasion of Earth, and the series is set several hundred years into the future. For this episode, I'm going to focus mainly on Contra 3: The Alien Wars, which came out on the Super NES in 1992. I picked this one because it's still my favorite of the series, and also it was the first one that I really got a chance to sink my teeth into. It was one of the first games I ever got a chance to rent and play on the Super Nintendo, and it really shows off what the system could do. You play as lone commandos Bill Reiser and Lance Bean and have to fight through 6 action-packed levels of alien mayhem. Everything about this game is just awesome. The graphics, the details on the enemies, and there's ridiculous oversized boss fights that are just really fun to play. I love how when the bosses show up on screen for the first time, it's this epic event, and you're just sitting there thinking, oh crap, what now? Sometimes they seem to just break right through objects in the environment. And like I said, this was one of the first games I got to play on the Super NES, and I'll never forget how jarring this made the leap from 8-bit to 16-bit seem. Everything about it just feels so polished and well done. Each level is its own thing too, and 2 of these levels are from a rotating overhead perspective showing off those Mode 7 graphics. I was surprised to see a lot of people didn't like those levels, but I always thought they were really cool. Okay, maybe level 5 kinda sucks with these stupid whirlpool quicksand things that spin you all over the place, but it's not too bad. The music and sound effects are fantastic too. Each track is really good, and it's just got that perfect little touch of the Super NES reverb. Contra 3 is difficult and punishing, but honestly, I never felt like it was unfair. You just kinda have to keep practicing and making your way a little further each time. Also, just try and stick to the spread weapon. And it's a relatively short game. You can beat it in under an hour if you know what you're doing. I still consider Contra 3 to be an absolute masterpiece and a perfect showcase for what the Super NES was capable of in the right hands. And I guess if we're going to talk about alien invasion games, here's one based on a famous alien invasion film, Independence Day. I actually had no idea this game existed until I started looking for games to cover in this video, and it's probably just as well. Well, first of all, they spent like 75% of the disk space digitizing lengthy FMVs of scenes from the film, and then managed to cram some semblance of a game in whatever space was left. I'm not even kidding, there's gotta be at least 20 minutes worth of pixely footage stuck in here, but you never see or hear any of the characters from the movie because the studio probably forgot to include video game likeness rights. And it's just the pictures from the movie too, it's not even the sound, so you got just kind of some weird, not Independence Day soundtrack music playing in the background. Anyway, so this got released for Microsoft Windows, Sega Saturn, and the version you're seeing here is PS1. So the whole game is just flying around underneath the mothership. It's supposed to be kind of an intense flight combat simulator, but it's not an especially good one. They give you a few objectives like take out the shield generators, and then once you complete that, you have to take out the mothership's primary weapon, kind of like in the movie. Half the time I couldn't even find whatever I was supposed to be destroying, which is an impressive feat given how claustrophobic these levels feel. So it should be cool that you're flying around in some of these different jets that are based on real-life counterparts, but it's not. You've always got the mothership looming overhead, and you're flying around at really low altitudes, so you have to avoid buildings or mountains or whatever, and the mothership's force field keeps you locked into this really tight area. There's just not much room to move around or do any cool maneuvers or anything like that. You're just kind of flying left and then flying right. And if that sounds like fun, well, you're in luck because there's 13, yes, 13 levels of this. Okay, so the good news is, if you really have your heart set on reliving the epic final battle from Independence Day in video game form, then check out this next game.
Hang on, guys. Help is on the way.
Star Fox 64 is one of my personal favorite Nintendo 64 games. I have very fond memories of this and must have played through it a dozen times when it first came out. In my mind, this is the best Star Fox game we ever got. The music is excellent, the controls are tight, and this type of rail shooter really amplified the console's strengths while covering for its weaknesses. For example, since it's mostly a rail shooter, you really don't have to worry about wonky camera angles like you would in some of the platformers from the time. Also, I just thought it was cool that they had enough space on the cartridge to throw in some recorded dialogue, so you get such great lines as this.
Cocky little freak!
Seriously, he said that?
Cocky little freak!
Also, Star Fox 64 has a fantastic version of the final battle from Independence Day in one of its levels. If you take the middle path to the Katina Frontline base, you'll get one of the all-range mode levels, which lets you fly in any direction you want in a fixed area, rather than being on rails. You catch up with one of your old buddies, Bill, who kinda sounds like a discount Ninja Turtle. You show up in the middle of the battle between Bill's squadron and a boatload of enemy ships, so you spend the first part just destroying as many enemy ships as you can. If you can't tell the good guys from the bad guys, just hold down the fire button to toggle the targeting system. You'll only be able to lock on to bad guys, and then release it to fire a guided shot to take them down. I pretty much use this attack all the time anyway, because you can take out multiple enemies at once with it, which will also net you a hit counter bonus. This is useful if you're trying to rack up enough hits to get the highly coveted Mission Accomplished tag for each level instead of just a puny, insignificant Mission Complete sticker. Seriously, if you only get the Mission Complete ending, you should feel terrible about yourself and you should just quit. Anyway, after you take out about a dozen or so enemies, the mothership shows up and you get this cutscene ripped straight out of ID4. The mothership sends out a ton more enemies, and it's impressive how many of them are flying around in the area at once. Keep destroying as many enemies as you can, and then take out the 4 hatches on the bottom of the mothership once they open up. After you get all of those taken out, then the mothership's main weapon appears, and you have to take it out before it takes out the base. But thankfully, you don't have to go full Randy Quaid and fly into it, you can just shoot it. Also, you should never, ever, ever go full Randy Quaid. Take out the main weapon, destroying the mothership, and fire up that victory dance because the winner is you!
Yeehaw! You did it!
So I mentioned before this list is kind of going to be all over the place, and not necessarily in any particular order. However, for these next couple of games, I'm going to focus primarily on a few DOS first-person shooters. Some of them you've probably heard of, and one of them you probably haven't. So here's Redneck Rampage. This 1997 Doom knockoff from Xatrix Entertainment isn't exactly reinventing the wheel, but it's got a harmless, stupid charm to it that I just love. You play as rednecks Leonard and Bubba in a fictional backwoods Arkansas town. There's an alien invasion in progress, and you set out to rescue your prized pig, Bessie. And that's basically it. What makes this fun is the commitment to the bit here on the developer's part. Your character rattles off nonsensical redneck one-liners throughout the game. The soundtrack is full-on themed rockabilly from the likes of Reverend Horton Heat, Mojo Nixon, and the Beat Farmers.
You know what he told me? He said, well, UFOs are big rigs. They come from outer space. Stopping off at the truck stop early, looking for some food to eat.
Weapons are what you'd expect to find in this setting: crowbars, pistols, shotguns, crossbows, powder kegs, and dynamite, although you do find some alien weapons a little later on as well. Power-ups are stuff like pork rinds, beer, and whiskey. Yes, alcohol helps you in this game, although if you drink too much of it, you'll get all drunk and uncoordinated. And, well, you just spend the whole game running around shooting aliens. There's even little creepy ETs running around. So, okay, honest question here. Am I the only one who was completely terrified of this alien as a kid? Seriously, this creepy guy just running around going, "Ah, ah, ah." Anyway, Redneck Rampage spawned a few sequels, and look, even though these games are not really all that well polished, I'm not ashamed to admit that this is just stupid and fun, and I'm totally fine with that.
Damn, I'm looking good.
Yes, Duke Nukem 3D. Developed by 3D Realms for DOS in 1996, so this time Duke Nukem is on his way back to Earth when his ride is shot down over Los Angeles, and that's right where you pick up as the player. Turns out, aliens have taken over LA and you can't even call the police because, well, they've all mutated into pigs, or possibly those guards from Jabba's palace, who knows? But now it's up to you to stop the aliens using the typical loadout of weapons you'd expect to find in a first-person shooter from the day, such as pistols, shotguns, chain guns, and rocket launchers. But there's some other cool stuff like remote pipe bombs and even a shrink ray. Both Redneck Rampage and Duke Nukem 3D use the build engine, which has some pros and cons compared to the Doom engine, although you can get a few more frames of animation into enemy sprites and do some other cool neat tricks, like the way you interact with the in-game environments. It comes at a cost of being, well, just a bit off and kind of glitchy. The games generally run fine for me now on a newer, faster machine, but if you didn't have a lot of horsepower to work with when these games first came out, your gameplay experience may have been a bit, wonky, but, that's okay because you're playing Duke Nukem 3D! All of the great fast-paced FPS action of Doom combined with an over-the-top crudeness and enough silly movie and science fiction references to make any teenager with a juvenile sense of humor just giddy with delight.
Much better.
But it's worth saying that Duke Nukem 3D isn't just a bunch of crass jokes and pixelated memory glands thrown together in a hodgepodge with the expectation that alone will make people buy it. They actually did an excellent job with the level design. Each of the levels makes sense, and there's all sorts of little devious traps and tricks thrown in. Item placement matters, and the game usually gives you just the right weapon for the right situation, and it's quite satisfying when you discover the various secrets each level has to offer. There's also some legit jump scares when aliens seemingly pop out of the shadows, and the lighting effects are excellent for the time.
Hail to the king, baby.
But yeah, there's that too. Mowing down aliens, pervasive strong language, and boob. And while we're on the subject, let's check out Duke Nukem 2.
Don't have time to play with myself.
I hardly ever see anyone mention the two Duke Nukem DOS games that came out before Duke Nukem 3D.
I am back.
These games were also from Gearbox and Apogee Software, and they were side-scrollers. The first game had a human antagonist, but in Duke Nukem 2, a giant alien mother ship appears over LA, Duke Nukem gets kidnapped by aliens during an interview on Oprah, and a three-legged dog saves a baby. So these games were side-scrollers, and, well, side-scroller games for DOS in the early 90s just kinda are what they are. Still though, there's a lot going on the screen at once, and the animations are impressive for the time. There's 4 episodes of alien mayhem to blast through, and I do love the bright, colorful level design. Okay, so for this next title, we're going to need a bit of backstory here, and you might want to get fitted for your tinfoil hat. In early 1996, there were a growing number of reports of UFOs in the vicinity of Varginha, Brazil. Yes, that's the name of the city, and no, it's not pronounced how you think. There were even reports made by witnesses who claimed to have seen alien creatures within the city. The crazy thing is, this got a lot of publicity in Brazil and eventually on a more global level, including being reported on in the United States. And it wasn't that long ago, so a lot of the witnesses or people directly involved with the incident are still alive. Filmmaker James Fox just released a documentary on the incident earlier this month called Moment of Contact, and it was kind of fascinating to see him track these people down in the present day and get them to tell their story. This isn't like the alleged Roswell crash of 1947, where we're 2 to 3 generations removed from anyone directly involved. And these people genuinely believe what they're saying. Whether you believe them or not is up to you, but their stories are compelling nonetheless. One of the eyewitnesses said he saw this cigar-shaped UFO crash land in the middle of a field, and small aliens came out. Then a bunch of military personnel showed up and threatened him at gunpoint to turn around and leave immediately. Then there were 3 young women who saw an alien in the city just hiding in a random alleyway. Later, a couple of MPs reportedly captured 2 aliens in the city on the side of the street and took them to a local hospital, which was quickly sealed off by the military. One of those MPs involved in the capture of the alien died a short time later from an immune condition, and his relatives all believe it was something to do with the handling of the creature without any protective equipment. Supposedly, these aliens all smelled like ammonia or rotten eggs, too. And overall, even people who didn't see aliens reported a bizarre but massive uptick in Brazilian military activity in the city of Virginia during the days surrounding these reported incidents. Since then, the city has kind of embraced the incident as something of a tourist attraction, again similar to Roswell, New Mexico. And, well, some brave soul took it upon themselves to make a game out of this whole story. In 1998, the Brazilian software company Perceptum released a DOS-based first-person shooter called the Virginia Incident, or as it came to be known in the States, Alien Anarchy, or possibly just Alien Shootout. I'm not sure. Honestly, it's hard to find much concrete info at all about this game. As far as I can tell, most of the work was done on it by this guy, Marcos F. Cuzil. So, okay, I'm just gonna get this out of the way right now. This game is terrible. The graphics are dreary as all heck, with a color scheme that looks like Lethal Enforcers, but worse somehow. The game runs on some rudimentary 3D game studio engine that's buggy as all heck, and the baseline control setup is totally awkward. So you move with the arrow keys on the keyboard, which is pretty standard for first-person shooters of the day, but you jump with the home button, and the strafe buttons are the angle brackets on each side of the spacebar. It was hard enough finding a version of this game that works, and I couldn't get DOSBox to remap the buttons in a more optimal way, so I did the best I could here when I was recording the footage. But what's fascinating about this game is how closely it follows some of the alleged 1996 Virginia UFO events, and that was even more apparent after having just watched the James Fox documentary. The game starts out with a cutscene of fighter planes chasing a UFO. You then play as a human, and in the first level you witness the UFO crash and aliens come scuttling out, followed by the military quickly showing up. Now, I use the term level here loosely. It's just this little field and you can't really go anywhere. If you linger around too long, the army guys just show up and shoot you, and you can't shoot back because you don't have a weapon yet. If you run over to the opening in this gate, you can jump into the water and then awkwardly jump onto this other ledge so you can trigger the next cutscene. But yeah, this part actually pretty closely matches the witness description who saw the first UFO crash outside the city. It's right next to a little white house on a hill just like he described. Then you get this weird cutscene where an alien almost gets run over by the military guys, and what? What is even happening here? Then there's another cutscene where you encounter an alien in the alleyway just like the 3 witnesses described, and it's even based on the artist's interpretation of the encounter with the little alien bent over in the corner next to the wall. But this time the alien actually speaks to you and gives you a little device which acts as a map and basic game HUD. So it's like they took the known events from the story of this UFO case and then kind of turned the volume up in an over-the-top and hammy way. You're a human who's supposed to be helping the aliens, and there's even a backstory thrown together in comic form in the manual. Once you get to the second level, the mission is to rescue the alien that was allegedly captured by the military, and you have to infiltrate the hospital where he's being held. But don't shoot any civilians or the aliens will scold you for being a horrible, horrible person, and then they'll send the cops after you and it's game over. So yeah, the play control is bad, and in general, there's just really nothing fun about this game, so I kind of stopped there. But it looks like they at least put a lot of work in to weave in some of the lore from the actual events, and that's not something I'd ever really seen before with a UFO case. I definitely don't recommend trying to play this game though, unless you're just an absolute masochist for awful DOS games. Maybe just watch the documentary if you're interested in learning more about the story. Well, some of those recent alien invasion games for DOS were fun, or at least interesting, but let's take it back a little further into the past. This time we're going to go just about as far back into the past as you can possibly go, as far as battling aliens in a video game. This time, we're going to go all the way back to 1978. That's right, kids. We're going all the way back to the beginning. Space Invaders. This was developed and initially released in the arcades by Taito in Japan. Later, Midway would license the rights to manufacture and produce arcade cabinets in the United States, and the game was an absolute smash hit for the time. The core story here is simple. Aliens are invading Earth, and it's up to you to man the core cannon and shoot them down one at a time. The aliens drop down one space at a time, moving back and forth faster and faster as you take them out. If they make it all the way to the ground, it's game over, man. There were so many great things about this game at the time, and even though its design seems so simplistic by today's standards, it's hard not to get hooked on it after a minute or two. Of the things that made the game so addicting and unique was the humble but effective bass line that permeates through the background. It goes along with the alien ship's movements and gets a little faster and faster as you mow your way through each round of aliens. This would genuinely trigger an emotional response from the player as you start to get a little more nervous toward the end of each round, and it's just an awesome example of how sometimes less really is more, and you don't necessarily need photorealistic graphics to have a fantastic video gaming experience. Fans thought so too, as it was one of the best performing arcade machines ever made, and the home versions did even better, going on to quadruple sales of the Atari 2600 console. This is the version I remember playing as a kid, and I still really love this version, even if it is much more primitive than its arcade counterpart. Now, there were a million knockoffs of Space Invaders, and in general, the idea of taking on hordes of aliens became pretty much the standard in arcades or on the old Atari. I could spend an hour talking about all of those. Sometimes you're fighting aliens on Earth, sometimes in space, who knows? Instead, I'm just going to pick one more Atari 2600 game that I think is noteworthy. I've covered this game in a standalone episode in the past, but a lot of folks may have missed that one, so here it is.
Comes with this phaser patrol game. Rocket stuff. And the kid can fight those commie mutants from space. 'Cause they're out there.
Communist mutants from space!
This has to be the greatest name for a video game ever. The story here is equally epic. The evil ruler from the planet Ruski has launched a diabolical attack. A cunning mother creature filled with irradiated vodka transforms helpless slaves captured on peaceful planets into bloodthirsty communist mutants. Ooh boy. So, I have to say, this game is actually pretty fun. This game was developed for the Starpath Supercharger Atari add-on, and the extra RAM is utilized quite well. It's basic Space Invaders controls. You control the ship at the bottom of the screen, and you have to take out the commie mutants floating overhead. But there's a twist. The little boxes that you see at first are eggs, and then they eventually hatch and turn into, well, more commie mutants. And then they fly down at you. And the mother creature on top keeps laying more eggs, so the pressure is on to keep blasting as fast as you can, or she'll just keep dropping more eggs. The goal is to eliminate all of the eggs, the mutants, and the mother creature so you can move on to the next round. There's not really a penalty though if the creatures make it past you towards the ground, other than you just miss out on the extra points. But overall, this game is just pretty dang fun for the time, and I have to recommend checking it out if you enjoy these types of shooters. Okay, for this next couple of games, let's jump around a bit on the 8-bit and 16-bit consoles. First up, here's Alien Storm on the Sega Genesis. This Golden Axe style beat-em-up was developed and released by Sega in 1990. The story here is simple, so simple that the manual barely goes into any detail at all. A bunch of vicious aliens have invaded Earth, and it's up to you, the Alien Busters, to stop them. You've got 3 Alien Busters to choose from, each with their own specific weapon. Gordon with his Thunder Bazooka, Slammer the Robot with his Stubby Electric Whip, and Carla has a flamethrower. So yeah, if you've played Golden Axe, you can pick this one up really easy. B is your main attack and the C button rolls, and you've got a screen clearing special that you can use by pressing A. But it's worth taking a quick look at the manual though, because there's some other little combo maneuvers you can do that aren't readily apparent. For example, you can press the D-pad left or right twice to run in that direction, which is helpful for evading a big group of enemies. You'll want to conserve energy too, because every time you use your special or even your regular weapon, your energy runs out. There's a fun little minigame at the end of each stage where you get to shoot up aliens in some random retail store for more energy. If I could change anything about this game, it's mostly just that your regular weapons are kind of boring and only short range. There's a stage where you're running really fast and you get to use a projectile weapon there. Why can't I just use that for the whole game? But overall, I like the big chunky enemy sprites, and they're all gross looking and just blah, blah, blah. Definitely a fun game to check out if you like Golden Axe. To the Earth for the NES. Hey, cool, this one's a gun game, so you get to use the zapper. In the year 2050, Earth has fallen under attack by the evil Ragosians. The human race is near extinction. They've been using a biological attack on the people of Earth. Crap. So your mission is to actually make it from a base near the edge of the solar system back to Earth so you can deliver an antibacterial agent that will neutralize the aliens' attack. Uranus. You're piloting a ship and also apparently hanging out of the window Grand Theft Auto style, firing your gun at all the enemy ships in your way. So there's some stuff I do really like about this game. The music reminds me a little bit of the end credits from Star Tropics. I enjoyed the little opening cutscene, and the 8-bit rendition of Earth really pops. It's just a nice shade of blue. But it's tough to keep up with all these enemies on screen at once, or maybe I'm just old. So your ship loses energy if you take damage from the enemy ships, and that makes sense. But the problem is you also lose energy if you miss, so if there's a big flurry of enemies and you crap the bed, it could leave you limping towards the finish line. Also, I kept accidentally shooting a friendly ship when it was supposed to be helping me refuel, so if you want to play To the Earth, don't be an idiot like me and read the manual first. So, there's one last NES game I want to take a closer look at, but before we do that, I'd like to take a minute and showcase a couple of upcoming games about alien invasions that I'm genuinely excited about. First up is a game based off of War of the Worlds. Now, it is based off of the 2005 War of the Worlds movie, which I'm not really a fan of, but don't hold that against it. As far as I can tell, they're just using the look and sound of the war machines from that film, but not really the story or Tom Cruise or any of that crap. I absolutely loved the 1953 War of the Worlds movie, though, as a kid, and also the 1988 TV sequel series to that movie, also titled War of the Worlds. Have you ever seen this? It picks up in the present day after the events of the 1953 film, or present day late 80s, and digs into the lore of the movie as well as the original book. I swear I've never met anyone who used to watch this show, but I did, and I thought it was pretty dang awesome. Maybe someday I'll have to do a deep dive on random old TV shows like this. Anyway, so this new War of the Worlds game is a survival game where, as far as I can tell, you just basically have to try and sneak around avoiding the war machines as well as avoiding all of the looters and the people who've gone mad with panic. It looks like it's still got a long ways to go, but I'm excited to see how it turns out. And next up is the Grey Hill incident. So, okay, if you're still watching this video by now, you may be starting to get the feeling that this Friday Night Arcade guy might be a bit of a UFO nut. Well, I'll just say that I grew up an X-Files kid and also had a lot of sleepless nights after some of those Unsolved Mysteries episodes about alien abductions, the Roswell crash, or cattle mutilations, all of that weird stuff that went along with the ufology lore. Well, Refugium Games has combined all of those elements to form a survival horror game called The Grey Hill Incident. This is due out in early 2023, and you can wishlist it on Steam right now. It even features the prototypical gray aliens that have haunted the nightmares of anyone familiar with the topic of alien abduction for decades. So I'm really excited for this game to come out.
Brandon, they're here.
Last and possibly least, here's The Simpsons Bart vs. the Space Mutants. What better way to prepare for an alien invasion than by spray painting all the purple stuff in town? Okay, so there's a lot of hate for this game out there, and rightly so. I'll get to that in a minute. But here's a look at this game from my own perspective as a kid. I actually bought this game on the NES with my own hard-earned allowance money. I was a Simpsons fan, so there was that. I think I remember reading a preview about the game in Nintendo Power and thought it looked pretty neat. Plus, I always liked the Space Mutant characters from the show. My favorite Halloween special is still the very first one where the Simpsons family all gets kidnapped by the Space Mutants, and they do the whole "to serve man" bit from the Twilight Zone. And to that end, just look at the box art for this game. there's so much wild wackiness going on here with space aliens terrorizing the whole town. This is just nuts. And you know, I didn't even really hate the game as a kid. I think because I bought the game and it was just like, well, this is the new game I have to play for the next 4 to 5 months till a birthday or Christmas rolls around, where they get some new stuff to rent at the local gas station. So let's just do the best we can with it. I thought the graphics weren't bad. For the most part, it exemplifies the colorful artwork of the show, and like this little cutscene at the beginning is actually pretty cool looking. All of the characters pretty much look as you'd expect, and yeah, the whole concept of the space mutants needing purple objects to complete their total domination of the planet doesn't make a dang bit of sense, but I was like 10. I didn't care. I enjoyed the puzzle elements behind these parts, like trying to figure out what you're supposed to use these items from the shop for, figuring out how to destroy or hide all the purple objects, but I was always a sucker for games like Shadowgate, where you've got to manage items in your inventory to solve puzzles, so there's that. There's also a nice nod to John Carpenter's They Live, where you've got to use your X-ray sunglasses to see which humans are taken over by aliens. Why did the space mutants go to all the trouble to take over human bodies when there's also just random alien squid things bouncing around in the streets? Who knows? Don't ask questions. Heck, I just thought it was cool you could go backwards in a level. Back in the early days of the NES, that was a big no-no. If you missed something at the beginning of the stage and you want to go back to the left to check it out, you can just go straight to hell. But yeah, trying to play this as an adult now, I have no idea how I had the patience to actually beat this game as a kid. The hit detection is abysmal, and it's tough to get anywhere near an enemy without taking a hit. The jump button is the same as the run button, so you basically have to jump, then hold down the same button to try to get a running start. It makes navigating some of these platforms near the top, and especially later in the game, just unnecessarily tedious and stupid. If you don't get things lined up just perfect, you could potentially waste an item, like trying to scare this bird with a bottle rocket. Great, now I've got to go all the way back to the shop and buy another one. Run out of coins? Well, the good news is they randomly pop out of bushes or enemies sometimes, but they also fly away from you faster than you can collect them, so that's just swell. Also, the Simpsons theme just plays on a continuous loop throughout the entire game. To be fair, I didn't even know this at the time. There were multiple ports of this game to various systems of the day, including the Atari ST, Amiga, ZX Spectrum, and all of the Sega consoles up to that point. And unfortunately, it just looks like the NES got the short end of the stick as far as the ports go. And maybe that's just because the technology of the day was moving on from the old Nintendo. It was 1991 after all, so I guess Acclaim figured why put too much time into it. Turns out the Sega Genesis version of the game is actually quite good. Better control since you've got the extra button, really nice graphics, and heck, they even get different themes for each level. What a novelty! So, if you really want to play Bart vs. the Space Mutants, skip the NES version and try to find the Amiga or the Sega Genesis version if you can. Well, that wraps it up for this episode, since we're all out of time, but there were way more alien invasion games that I'd like to take a look at. We didn't even get a chance to get to Body Harvest on Nintendo 64, or the X-Files point-and-click adventure game, or any of the XCOM games. There's a ton more that I really want to take a look at, so we'll save those for a sequel episode. And if there's any specific alien invasion games that you'd like to see me cover, let me know in the comments down below. Also, if any of you have ever actually seen a UFO or had a paranormal experience that you're willing to share, I'd love to hear about it in the comments down below. So I wanted to let you know that this month marks the 8-year anniversary of Friday Night Arcade on YouTube. When I uploaded my first video back in October of 2014, I never in a million years thought that it would be around for this long. Anyway, I just wanted to take this chance to thank each and every one of you for watching the show over the years. Whether you've been around since the beginning or maybe just discovered the channel more recently, thank you so much for your support and all of the kind words. It really does mean a lot. So anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful and safe and happy Halloween, and I'll see you next time on Friday Night Arcade.